Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to explore one of the most tragic story of love, betrayal, and death. The case of Ashley and Douglas Benefield. It's a story that begins like a fairy tale, but ends in bloodshed. It's the story of a young ballerina who dreamed of becoming a star, and an older man who believed he had found the love of his life. Together they tried to build a dream, but instead, they built a nightmare. On September 27, 2020, in Lakewood Ranch, Florida, a chilling emergency call came in around 6 p.m. A man told dispatchers that a woman, his neighbor, had come running up to his house crying for help. She said she was fleeing from her husband who had attacked her, but what stood out immediately was the detail that shocked everyone. She wasn't empty-handed. She was holding a gun. Police rushed to the scene. Inside the bedroom of the house, they found her husband, Douglas Benefield, alive but gravely wounded. He had been shot multiple times, once in the leg, once in the chest, and with a grazing wound on his arm. Shell casings from a .45 caliber pistol lay scattered on the floor. Blood stained the walls. Douglas was rushed to the hospital, but within an hour he was pronounced dead. The woman who pulled the trigger was his wife, Ashley Benefield. At first glance, Ashley's story seemed straightforward. She claimed she had no choice. She said Douglas was violent, controlling, and she feared for her life. Shooting him, she insisted, was self-defense. But was it really? Or was it something darker, the culmination of years of manipulation, paranoia, and obsession? To understand how this marriage went from whirlwind romance to deadly tragedy, we need to go back to the beginning. It was August 2016 in Palm Beach, Florida. Ashley Byers, a 24-year-old aspiring model and ballerina, was attending a Republican fundraising event. She was young, ambitious, and heavily involved in politics. At the time, she worked at Donald Trump's campaign headquarters in Sarasota, where her role was to mobilize evangelical voters and organize rallies. Ashley had beauty, grace, and ambition. She had trained with the Maryland Youth Ballet and occasionally performed, but her real dream was bigger. She wanted to found her own ballet company, one that would embrace dancers of all nationalities and body types. At that same fundraiser, Douglas Benefield, a man 30 years her senior, also attended. Douglas was 54 years old, a former Navy pilot, successful entrepreneur, and consultant. He had worked in technology, defense contracts, real estate, and restaurants. He was also a widower, still grieving the sudden loss of his wife, Renee, who had died of an undiagnosed heart condition just months earlier. Douglas was raising his teenage daughter, Ava, alone. Life had been difficult, but Douglas was a man of strong faith and discipline. When he met Ashley, he was captivated by her youth, her beauty, and her energy. After dinner that evening, he asked for her number, and from that moment, their romance moved with lightning speed. Within just 13 days, Douglas and Ashley were married. The wedding took place in Charleston, South Carolina, Douglas's hometown. It was a modest ceremony, attended only by a few people. The officiant was Douglas's longtime friend, Trip Cormany, an Episcopal pastor. Even Trip was uneasy about the speed of the marriage. He warned Douglas that it was far too soon to marry a woman he barely knew, but Douglas insisted. He was deeply religious and wanted to marry Ashley before becoming intimate with her. For him, it was a matter of faith. But while Douglas's friends were surprised, no one was more shocked than his daughter, Ava. At just 15 years old, Ava was still struggling to cope with her mother's death. Only months earlier, she had come home from school to find her mother lifeless on the floor. The sudden remarriage of her father, and to a woman only 9 years older than her, was devastating. Ava didn't even attend the wedding. She wasn't invited. Ashley moved into Douglas's Charleston home, but her relationship with Eva was rocky from the very start. Ashley didn't want to play the role of stepmother or even friend. Eva, in turn, felt like she was losing her father to a stranger. What should have been the blending of a family became a house divided. Despite the tension at home, Douglas was enchanted by Ashley. He showered her with gifts, compliments, and promises. He saw her as a pure, graceful swan, a symbol of beauty and perfection, and he vowed to help her achieve her biggest dream, starting a ballet company. Ashley envisioned something groundbreaking, a ballet company that welcomed dancers of all shapes, sizes, and backgrounds. Douglas, with his business background, believed he could make her dream a reality. Together, they founded the American National Ballet, ANB, in Charleston. They announced nationwide auditions and began attracting dancers from across the globe. By the summer of 2017, about 40 dancers arrived in Charleston to audition and join the company. Douglas handled the logistics while Ashley was supposed to be the creative visionary. But things quickly began to unravel. Contracts were broken, dancers were fired, lawsuits were filed. Within months, Ashley's grand vision collapsed, and the American National Ballet was finished. Douglas lost more than $100,000 in the failed project. The dancers left feeling betrayed, and Ashley publicly distanced herself from the company, even criticizing its management, despite the fact that her own husband had been running it. The ballet was gone, but the real drama was only beginning. While Douglas was trying to salvage the ballet, his marriage with Ashley was disintegrating. Arguments between Ashley and Ava grew more heated. Douglas, who had always been calm and rational, snapped under the pressure. In one argument, he fired a gun into the ceiling of their home, a shocking moment completely out of character for him. Friends later said Douglas was never violent, never confrontational. Yet Ashley would hold on to that incident for years, repeating it as proof of her fear of him. By late 2017, Ashley returned to Florida to live with her mother. She was pregnant, claiming she needed to focus on her health. From there, she began filing accusations against Douglas, accusations that would only grow more serious over time. First, she accused him of poisoning her. Douglas had sent Ashley a tea set as a birthday gift, including specialty tea for pregnant women. Ashley claimed the tea was laced with poison. She sent samples of her hair to a private lab, which reported elevated levels of aluminum and zinc. She accused Douglas of trying to kill her and their unborn child. Authorities investigated, but no evidence of poisoning was ever found. Still, Ashley persisted. She told hospital staff that Douglas was abusive, that he stalked her, that he held her captive in his Charleston home, even though at that very time he was living hundreds of miles away. When Ashley gave birth in early 2018, hospital staff took her fears so seriously that they gave her a new name, Christina, to protect her. Douglas, meanwhile, begged for reconciliation. He sent Ashley message after message, still seeing her as the love of his life. But Ashley wasn't coming back. In the summer of 2018, the poisoning accusations came to a head in court. Ashley filed for a restraining order, presenting her lab tests and accusations. Douglas fought back, determined to see his newborn daughter. After 2 days of testimony, Judge Diana Moreland ruled against Ashley. She stated there was not a shred of credible evidence that Ashley had been poisoned or abused. Douglas was exonerated, and Ashley's claims were dismissed. But the courtroom battle didn't end there. Ashley accused Douglas of mistreating his daughter Eva. She accused him of stalking. She accused him of violence. Every claim was investigated. Every claim collapsed. Psychological evaluations declared Douglas to be stable, rational, and nonviolent. Still, Ashley's accusations continued. Douglas, meanwhile, clung to the hope of reuniting his family. He rented an apartment near Ashley's home in Florida to be close to his daughter. For a time, they seemed to coexist peacefully. Ashley even appeared cordial, at least in front of others. But beneath the surface, the storm was only intensifying. In August 2019, Douglas went to pick up his daughter from Ashley. That's when he noticed something, an engagement ring on her finger. Ashley was seeing another man. Douglas, heartbroken, hired a private investigator. His suspicions were confirmed. Ashley had moved on. Soon after, Douglas filed for divorce. But Ashley's retaliation was swift. She accused him again, this time of indecent behavior toward their daughter. Authorities investigated. Once again, no evidence was found. By 2020, the marriage was beyond repair. And yet, in a shocking twist, Douglas announced that he and Ashley were going to give it one more try. They would reunite for the sake of their daughter and move to Maryland for a fresh start. Friends were stunned. How could Douglas, after everything, still want Ashley back? But to Douglas, Ashley was still the Swan he had fallen in love with. He still believed in the dream of a perfect family. It would be the decision that cost him his life. By September 2020, Douglas Benefield was preparing to move with Ashley, their young daughter, and Ashley's mother, Alicia, from Florida to Maryland. Friends believed that this might finally be the start of a new chapter, a chance to rebuild the broken family and escape the bitterness of the past. But beneath the surface, old resentments were still simmering. On the evening of September 27, 2020, Ashley and Douglas were at Alicia's house in Lakewood Ranch, packing boxes for the move. Around 5:30 p.m., Alicia decided to take the baby out for a walk to the park, leaving Ashley and Douglas alone. For a moment, things seemed calm. But then, according to Ashley, the conversation took a dark turn. She later claimed that Douglas became angry when she said they would be moving without him. He allegedly grabbed her by the arm, pulled her back, and scolded her like a child, pointing his finger at her face and saying, "You can't leave me." To Ashley, this was the moment she feared most. She insisted she believed her life was in danger. Instead of leaving the house, she ran into the bedroom and grabbed her legally owned .45 caliber pistol. When Douglas continued walking toward her, Ashley fired. The first shot hit his leg. The second struck his chest. Another bullet grazed his arm. 2 more bullets lodged in the wall. Douglas fell to the floor, bleeding heavily. Ashley didn't stay with him. She ran outside, clutching the gun in her hands, and screamed for help. Neighbors walking their dogs saw her, panicked, crying, waving the weapon. One man called 911, telling dispatchers that a woman had fled her house, saying her husband had attacked her. When police arrived, Douglas was still alive but fading fast. He was rushed to the hospital where doctors tried desperately to save him. Within an hour, Douglas Benefield was dead. Ashley was taken in for questioning. Surprisingly, she wasn't arrested that night. She repeated her story of self-defense, claiming Douglas had attacked her and she had no choice but to shoot. Detectives began their investigation, but the evidence quickly raised troubling questions. At first glance, Ashley's claim of self-defense seemed possible. Florida's Stand Your Ground law allows someone to use deadly force if they reasonably believe they are in imminent danger of being killed or seriously injured. Unlike traditional self-defense laws, there is no requirement to retreat before using force. But when investigators looked closer, cracks in Ashley's story began to appear. For one, Douglas had no weapon on or near him. He wasn't armed when he was shot. Second, the autopsy revealed that at least one of the shots had entered Douglas's body from behind, suggesting he wasn't facing Ashley or advancing toward her at the time of the shooting. Third, Ashley's own injuries were minimal. She had a small cut on her body, which her defense later claimed came from a moving box Douglas shoved toward her, and a black eye. But these injuries didn't appear consistent with the violent struggle she described. Detectives also uncovered the long history of accusations Ashley had made against Douglas: poisoning, stalking, abuse, confinement. Time and time again, authorities had investigated, only to find no credible evidence. To prosecutors, it looked less like self-defense and more like a pattern, a campaign of manipulation that had finally escalated to murder. 5 weeks after the shooting, Ashley Benefield was formally arrested and charged with second-degree murder. The arrest shocked many people. Ashley was known in political circles, the ballet community, and among friends as elegant, intelligent, and ambitious. To some, she was the grieving widow of a dangerous man. To others, she was a calculating manipulator who had used fear and paranoia to justify killing her husband. Ashley pleaded not guilty. She was released on bail after spending 2 weeks in jail, but prosecutors were determined to prove that her claims of self-defense were false. Ashley's lawyers argued that she shot Douglas in self-defense under Florida's Stand Your Ground law. They claimed she lived in constant fear, describing him as volatile and abusive, with incidents where he allegedly punched walls, fired a gun into the ceiling, and even struck their dog. To support her story, the defense presented photos of bruises and a cut, which they said showed a pattern of abuse. They emphasized Douglas's size and strength compared to Ashley's smaller frame, insisting she had every reason to believe her life was in danger that night. In their version, the shooting was not murder, but the desperate act of a woman who felt she had no other choice. Prosecutors rejected Ashley's claims, portraying her not as a victim but as a manipulative woman who staged the shooting. They argued there was no clear evidence Douglas had ever physically abused her, and pointed out that witnesses described him as gentle and nonviolent. To them, Ashley's injuries were either exaggerated or self-inflicted. They emphasized that Douglas was unarmed when he was shot, and that Ashley had time to call for help instead of pulling the trigger. In their narrative, this was not self-defense, but murder, a calculated act driven by control and resentment. After reviewing the evidence, Circuit Court Judge Stephen White delivered a decisive ruling. He denied the motion to dismiss. Judge White wrote that the evidence showed the killing was not a single act of necessary self-defense, but the culmination of a long concerted effort by Ashley Benefield. He agreed with prosecutors that probable cause existed for the case to proceed to trial. In other words, Ashley was not entitled to immunity under Stand Your Ground. The case would move forward. The case quickly gained national attention, in part because of its strange mix of glamour, politics, and tragedy. Ashley had once been admired as a ballerina and political activist. Douglas had been respected as a Navy veteran and businessman. Their whirlwind romance, dramatic public collapse, and the fatal shooting turned their story into a media spectacle. Some people sympathized with Ashley, believing she had been trapped in an abusive marriage and acted out of desperation. Others saw her as manipulative, someone who used her image of innocence to mask darker motives. The nickname the Black Swan began circulating, drawing parallels to the film about a ballerina consumed by paranoia and self-destruction. For Douglas, who once saw Ashley as a pure white swan, the metaphor was haunting. As of now, Ashley Benefield still awaits trial. She faces the charge of second-degree murder, a crime that carries a potential sentence of life in prison. Her attorneys continue to argue that she acted in self-defense, while prosecutors maintain she deliberately killed Douglas in cold blood. The case highlights the complexities of Florida's Stand Your Ground law. While it gives broad protection to those who defend themselves, it also places heavy emphasis on whether the fear of harm was reasonable. In Ashley's case, the court must decide, was she genuinely in fear for her life? Or was that fear exaggerated, even imagined, a product of years of paranoia and manipulation? The truth may never be fully known. Lost in the chaos of the legal battle is the memory of Douglas himself. Douglas was a man who served his country as a Navy pilot, raised a daughter after the sudden loss of his wife, and pursued business ventures with passion and dedication. Friends described him as kind, disciplined, and deeply religious. He fell in love with Ashley quickly, perhaps too quickly, and believed he had found a partner who would bring joy back into his life. He invested his time, money, and heart into her dreams. But in the end, his devotion led him down a tragic path. Douglas's daughter Eva, who was only 15 when her father remarried, has had to endure the loss of both parents, first her mother to illness, then her father to violence. Her testimony and her future remain overshadowed by the trial. The story of Ashley and Douglas Benefield is a chilling reminder of how love can turn toxic, how ambition can collapse into obsession, and how fear, real or imagined, can destroy lives. Ashley once seemed to Douglas like a white swan, graceful, pure, untouchable. But in reality, she became something darker, the Black Swan. Whether she was truly a victim or a manipulator, only the court can decide. But one fact is certain: Douglas Benefield lost his life in the home of the woman he loved, and now Ashley Benefield must face justice. Thank you, friends, for joining me on this chilling true crime journey. Your support keeps these dark stories alive. Please like the video, leave a comment, and share with fellow mystery lovers. Subscribe to the channel to catch the next spine-tingling story. See you soon.